Now, before you all buy your official Garnet-based Magic the Gathering decks, let's finally get to the comics and get to that heavy sphere thing I've been mentioning for several videos now. The heavy sphere is first mentioned in Steven Universe comic number 7, under the short story title, Storytime. In this story, Connie tells Pearl a story entitled Carrion Amongst the Clovers, which seems to actually be an allegory about the series itself. In this story, the character Merle is a princess in line for the throne, but she doesn't want to take on its responsibilities, and so clearly she flees her land. During this time, she walks amongst the people of the Heavy Sphere, which is implied to be a neighboring nation that has had tension with hers for quite some time. This visit to the Heavy Sphere, however, actually helps Merle reunite the people of both kingdoms later on. She is eventually saved by Sir Agarati and his servant Peapod, an encounter with a monster. Her mentor Everlord also dies by being banished behind the Shadow Curtain, causing her to go into a deep, inconsolable depression. This Shadow Curtain is apparently the only barrier between Merle's kingdom and the Heavy Sphere, as moving through it causes the body to break down completely, leaving only a person's essence intact. Finally, Connie reveals that Merle was only intended to be the main character for the first 2 books, after which the rest of the series follows Peapod as he grows into the one true magician. Pearl refuses to believe the story as having any logical sense and tries to prove her worth over Peapod by defeating some gem monsters. So, trying to draw direct connections between the show and this story, Pearl seems to be implied to be the intended leader for the Crystal Gems, or some other larger organization, but has, or will, doubt herself and her abilities to take on this role. Sir Agarati, Peapod, and Everlord are the other named characters in the story. While it's heavily implied that Everlord is an equivalent to Rose, picking out who Peapod and Agarati are a bit more difficult. In the drawing itself, Peapod looks identical to Steven. Agarati, however, looks like a stereotypical knight with a purple color scheme, possibly being amethyst. Alternatively, however, the 2 characters can be references to Peridot and Jasper. If Pearl is Merle, Peapod would be closest to Peridot under the naming conventions only, and in fact, she would be subservient to a quartz if based on ranking. Agarati is most similar to the gem agate, which is a type of quartz that is almost visually identical to Jasper's. Then there is the Shadow Curtain, which has put the Everlord into a state of unembodied existence. It poses a problem of logic to the story, which ironically Pearl didn't point out. If the Shadow Curtain is a vaporizing gate between Merle's kingdom and the Heavy Sphere, how did Merle get past it in the first place to escape? Not only that, but essentially managing to unite the people from 2 worlds separated by this all-consuming barrier. It's weird. Speaking of which, both Jasper and Pearl are set to lead and unite the gems at the same time, as we have explained in Magic the Gathering. Are they supposed to be co-monarchs or something? Probably not. I've been assuming this whole time that the Heavy Sphere is a reference to Homeworld and the other gems, but that doesn't match up with the information that we have here. The 2 kingdoms are separated by this Shadow Curtain barrier, which has only been crossed by the Everlord, aka Rose Quartz, but they've essentially been killed by the process, yet they're not actually dead? Homeworld is just separated by several hundred light years of space from Earth, which is not actively dangerous. While it would kill a human outright if we are exposed to it, it's not that much of a threat to gems, as Peridot explains in the episode It Could Have Been Great. It still stands that Jasper will be the one to unite Earth and the Homeworld gems, as explained in the video Rules of Magic. Pearl is going to have a much more unusual journey, however, in traveling to the state of the Heavy Sphere and back, a task that even Rose had failed. Pearl may be the first character to ever become a corrupted gem on screen, a process which will cause her to lose her body and mind, instead becoming a more primal, animalistic monster powered by raw instinct and emotions, and she will overcome this transformation. Through this, Pearl will be the first gem to cross the Shadow Curtain freely, and be able to reach the other corrupted gems that live beyond this curtain of sanity. But remember, Merle lost her importance after the 2nd book. It may be Season 3 now of Steven Universe, but both Seasons 3 and 2 are going to be half as long as the initial Season 1. So in that regard, we can think of them as being Book 2 together. Perhaps the reason why everyone wants out of Beach City is due to the sudden appearance of a gem monster, whom their guardians cannot defeat, whether it is because it is too powerful, or perhaps they become outnumbered. Perhaps the reason Amethyst becomes a more unstable character is the fact that her home will be destroyed by someone who swore to protect it. Perhaps the reason why Peridot will be forced to deal with people is that it will be the only way to survive outside of her little barn, now destroyed. And in Book 3, Seasons 4 and onward, our little Peapod Steven will have to finally learn to own his powers in a world teeming with gem monsters, a faction that has been so casually forgotten in recent episodes. In issue number 6, we also see the inside of a gem for the first time, Pearl specifically. After bubbling a live gem monster, Garnet and Steven enter her gem to try and sort things out, or at least they find that it's already been done for them. The inside of Pearl's gem starts out with a Greco-Roman room, surrounded by countless doors on all sides. It is implied that within each door is something that Pearl has previously stored, and only she knows the organization method for where everything is. Beyond the doors, however, things get a little weird. Anything behind the doors seems to be a formless space, which Garnet refers to as the mind, and that it is infinite. One can spend an eternity trying to explore it. So, from this we get an idea of how the whole pocket dimension power each gem possesses seems to work. It's their minds. They start out as this formless, empty space, which is the raw mind, and it can expand depending on the person's thoughts, emotions, and memories. We also see this somewhat in the recent episode Gem Drill, when Steven manages to communicate to the cluster directly inside of it. Though, it doesn't have to stay that way. As we see with Pearl, she maintains a consistent room which one can enter, and leads to the other portions of her mind all in an organized manner. Passing through these doors, however, will lead one back out into the formless mind. Pearl has only bothered to define what she feels is needed. This does bring up some interesting questions though, if these pocket dimensions are actually just the mental constructs of gems. Firstly, if an item is stored inside of a gem's mind, does it become one of their thoughts and stops being real? Is it destroyed upon entering the gem? Or, when gems summon their weapons, are they created from their imaginations? If so, is it possible for gems to summon just about anything then? I mean, after all, if they're able to summon metal weapons, how is that any different from, say, a cell phone? Can someone use this power to create life? Finally, what is even the reality of a creature that can do something like this? If you can turn real objects into formless thoughts, and imaginary thoughts into real objects, then what's the difference? Where do you draw the line between your own mind and the outside reality? Is your imaginative mind just as real as the clothes that you wear? Or are we figments of imagination inside of something much bigger? And with that, we have gone through just about every facet available about the show. But we aren't done quite yet. What are the corrupted gems exactly, and what has Rose been trying to do during all of her time exiled on Earth? I'll answer these final questions on the next and last theory video. Keep your curtains closed now.
You're just a phase. You know that, right? Of course you don't. You don't know anything about Rose. Rose may find you charming, but that's only because you're human. You're a novelty, at best.
What makes you so sure?